Yeah, and like, so can we get back into sort of the power of words and like, for example, my podcast, my social media is the Impaired Grappler, and I knew from the start that that's a powerful, and I don't want to manifest impairments by being that, but what I want to show people that you can still do stuff with impairments and get over and like still keep going, and but the sort of, well, that's just one example, like just in terms of the power of words, and then giving power through to words through fear, or fear porn. Could you touch on that?
Definitely. So there's, it's funny. I was just thinking about that whole impaired grappler aspect, because you're right. It's like the thing about the words is that people will argue that all words have an inherent meaning and an inherent resonance and a value, and they mean something, that if you're using them unconsciously, you will be casting spells and everything else. And to a degree, that's true. But when you hold the conscious awareness of a word, it's my understanding anyway, I'm not saying that I'm telling the absolute truth about this, but I believe that overrides what inherent nature there's supposed to be in a word. So when you have a full understanding of the word impaired and you are using it in your conscious way, you're actually bringing it about in a way that you choose, and you're not casting a spell on yourself that is like, it's, like it's stopping you from doing something, or it's a negative. Because when you're using it in the way that you're doing, it's because you want to show people that things are possible when they might think that they're not. So in that regard, I think the spells that we cast are conscious when we have the conscious awareness of what we're doing, as opposed to an unconscious thing that we're just being, we're under somebody else's spell. So if you think about a word and then you go, well, if somebody says a word and you don't know what it is, if it had an inherent meaning, you should be able to pick that up. So if somebody said, Ra means the sun, it's like, well, if that's what it means, you should be able to make that sound, and inherently my biology knows to look at the sun. But that's not the case. So we make a sound and then we affix or associate a meaning with it, and then we tell people that that's the meaning. So realistically, to me, I don't buy into the whole negativity of spell casting, because we learn it, a lot of it's learned. Now, some of it does come from phonetics, and it comes from the natural resonance of things. So Sanskrit, for example, is a science itself. Like the words are done in such an amazing way, where it says one thing going one way, and you can read it backwards as well, and it also makes sense. And it's based on, like, they would listen to rocks and what sound does a rock make, and then that sound translates into the language, and then it becomes the word. And in that regard, that is listening to nature. That's listening to what sound does the universe make, essentially, and then putting that into language. But it still has to come through the filter of being a human being through an ego. So it's not the actual thing, because otherwise somebody could speak in Sanskrit, and then I would understand what a rock sounds like, for example, and their word for rock, I wouldn't have to translate it, I would know it. I would just know. So to me, that's on that level. I think that words are given meaning. I think I came up with a quote a few years ago, I'll quote myself. I said that nothing really means anything, but everything means something. So what that means is that when we make words up, they don't have an inherent meaning, but they do mean something. And so it's just finding what that is. So that's the best way I can try to explain the spells.
Yeah. And like with that Sanskrit, I think they did some somatic experiments on it, and the shapes that each sound made actually looked like the letter in the alphabet, like had a similar. So it's like what you're saying, it's resonant. It's showing what the sound is linked to what it is in the natural world. That makes sense.
Yeah. That's what it's supposed to do. So but then, then everything gets watered down throughout our modern history. Like it's all stolen, and then, hey, people can't know that, so they change stuff. And
yeah, well,
so I don't really know where anyone is with language, but I know that English is the worst by far. If you speak English, it's the most controlled and spell-written language on earth. It's a legal language. It's the last language developed by the legal profession. And most of what we say, we think we're saying one thing, but we're actually probably saying or meaning the complete opposite of what the real words mean. So yeah, there's that aspect to it as well. But the more ancient a language, the more intact it is.
Yeah. So the legalese they use to entrap us because we think we're saying one thing, and then it's like, oh, you're saying something else. You're admitting to guilt when you're saying not guilty, almost.
Exactly. Yeah.